basic idea, Bill Gross, is your world is a bond world and the central banks own all the bonds. This is percolating right now. How are we going to unravel those balance sheets that those banks hold, and what's going to happen when those bonds come out on the market?
I don't think they ever do, Tom, and that's perhaps a startling forecast. But you know, for the Fed, which has $4 trillion, and for the ECB, which has close to $4 trillion equivalent, and the Bank of Japan, which has even more, for them to unwind, you know, current holdings would put undue pressure on financial markets. And so the next question would be, so what goes from there? And I think ultimately that central banks, as perhaps epitomized by the BOJ, will simply stick a 0% interest rate on those bonds and forgive them forever. I think that's the way it goes.
Forgive them forever, but what is critical here, Bill, is the idea there's a new guy on the block, President Trump. I know you're going to write a monthly note for Janice, and I'm sure it's going to be about President Trump. We need your observation of the last 11 days. What have you observed?
Well, I've observed, as everyone has, a lot of potential action, a lot of sound and fury, and whether it signifies nothing, I don't think it does. I think it signifies, you know, ultimately significant things. What does it mean in terms of fiscal policy? I think it means an increasing deficit, you know, perhaps 3 to 4% of GDP, depending upon what the corporate tax rate resounds to. I think ultimately that the 100% of debt to GDP that we have in the U.S., which is, you know, by the way, fairly low relative to some other countries, but that increases over time. And I think in terms of the great distortion, what we've had is, you know, increasing debt and lower interest rates on that debt. And so ultimately something has to give in terms of you know, whether that debt is forgiven, like I talked about in terms of the balance sheet, answering your question, or the interest rate on that debt, which private investors will, you know, increasingly be unsatisfied with. So the great distortion ultimately results in market movements that themselves may be distorted.